the gap, standing for Jesus. Standing in the gap for family and friends. Standing in the gap, one love for all, so we all can make it in.
One of the things about this standing in the gap is that things are so much is happening in the world. I mean, you can't deny it. And God loved the world so much, He put us in the middle of it. We have to operate in this world. And so we can't just turn our back and walk away, go to the top of a mountain, become a recluse, and just leave it alone, because we have to work in the midst of it. And therefore, what we like to do is keep you up to date on what's going on in the world. We call this segment of the broadcast Gap News. Gap News. And Marvel's in charge of that. She's got something to present you on current events. Marvel, what you got?
Well, I'm back. So, it's Black History Month. And last week I started a series, Black History Month, but not so much the old Black history, but who is making Black history today. And I've got who's making Black history in the military. Who are the great leaders in the military? And as I was working on it last night, Art said, well, what about Colin Powell? I said, well, he's dead. That's old history. He said, well, and I said, well, okay. So we're going to start out with some old Black history with the military, and then we're going to swing on into these new great leaders in our military.
This is the surprisingly Black history of the U.S. military. The first man who died in the Revolutionary War was a Black man, Crispus Attucks. But you wouldn't know that from your high school history class. Black people were just ghosted out of the conversation as if it was an Academy Award ceremony. But just because you can't see them in the textbook doesn't mean they weren't there. In the Civil War, African Americans weren't just fighting someone else's war, they were fighting for their own freedom. But like most things in American history, integration didn't happen overnight. In fact, Black men were barred from serving in the Union Army until a few years in. That's right, Black people had to fight for their right to fight for their own freedom. And during the Civil War, an estimated 504 people were dying every single day. And it turns out that massive death is a great motivator for inclusion. So in 1863, the Black presence in the military went from 0 to 1 in every 10. In fact, scholars argue that the fresh surge of Blackness was exactly what was needed to change the tide for the Union to win the Civil War. Yes, they should have done that way earlier. That's like having Jordan on the bench until halftime. Well, a year after the war ended, Congress decided it was time for Black Americans to enter the regular Army too. So they passed the Army Organization Act, which ultimately led to the formation of those Buffalo Soldiers that Bob Marley was talking about. Their job was to rein in the lawlessness happening after the war.
And they were also used to control the Indian populations against uprisings and other attacks on the American frontier. So I think the African-American soldiers that were on the frontier may have had some empathy for the Native Americans that were out there not part of American society. You can imagine how the combat operations were probably pretty brutal.
And also shoot the poor buffalo that kept charging folks unannounced. These soldiers were often tasked to do this in below zero weather, hence all the pictures of them looking like they just walked out of a P. Diddy house party. Smash cut to World War II, and the next frontier for Black soldiers is to go from the land to the sky. And leading the way were the Tuskegee Airmen, the first Black military aviators in U.S. Army Corps. These badasses escorted nearly twice as many U.S. bombers to safety as the average Air Force escort group, destroying the widely spread and widely stupid belief that Black people couldn't learn to fly aircraft.
I think a lot of African Americans who served in World War II were looking to show the world, especially America, that they were American and that they would fight for their country and that they weren't cowards and they weren't stupid. And it worked.
And although these men still face prejudice on their return home, their excellence and their bravery is what led to Truman's executive order to finally desegregate the U.S. Armed Forces on July 26, 1948.
What they did really did change America for a lot of people of color. Those are the people that fought in World War II are Martin Luther King's generation. And look at all they did for Black people, for American people. I believe that when they came back, they weren't going to sit in the back of the bus anymore. They weren't going to allow themselves to be treated like that anymore because of what they did for this country.
We saw that we were in a market to find labor. No more conscripting free talent and free labor. We had to go compete in the workplace. And to compete in the workplace, you had to make the work more attractive. You had to appeal to young men and women to join the armed forces of the United States because it was a noble thing to do.
Potentially history-making pick as President-elect Joe Biden gets set to tap General Lloyd Austin to be his defense secretary. If confirmed by the Senate, Austin would become the first African-American to head up the Pentagon. Austin retired as a 4-star general from the Army in 2016 after serving for 41 years. He rose through the ranks, becoming the leader of U.S. Central Command, where he was responsible for overseeing military strategy in the Middle East. While he is well respected and known as a strong battlefield commander.
Well, good morning, everybody. Hey, listen, I really appreciate you carving out a little time for me this morning. I want to do one thing, and that thing is to say thank you for doing what you do. And I hope you realize how important this is. I know when you're working hard each and every day and things are going not quite like you want them to go every day, you sometimes question whether or not what you're doing at that time is really making a difference. It is.
As we mark the first day of Black History Month, we hear from a woman making history herself in New York Harbor, keeping us safe while blazing new trails.
You know, if this is your office, this isn't that bad.
Yeah. This office is better known as Sector New York, the largest Coast Guard field command on the East Coast. And we're on board a 45-foot response boat with the boss, the commander here, U.S. Coast Guard Captain Zeita Marchant.
Just to be in this position is just a historic for me and historic for the Coast Guard. Just being the first minority to be the captain of the port of New York, it's humbling.
Not to mention challenging, hectic, and exhilarating.
There's a lot of intelligence that's coming into this room.
The safety and security demands of the third largest port in the country are relentless.
To New York being the #1 terrorist target, we have camera systems all across the port.
At one of the nation's most strategically important port complexes,
80% of goods coming into the port of New York has to come through this waterway.
What's the likelihood that a little girl who grows up in Jackson, Mississippi, what's the likelihood that she would end up right here?
I would say 0 or 1%.
It was a chance meeting with a recruiter at tiny Tougaloo College in Mississippi that changed the course of Captain Marchant's life.
What'd your family say? You go home and say, I'm going to join the Coast Guard. Well, how did that go?
I knew I was applying for this scholarship program. I was going to get my tuition paid. I was going to have a guaranteed job after college. So at the end of the day, that's really the only thing my mom cared about. I grew up in Mississippi. I was born in Chicago. There was 7 of us in a 2-bedroom apartment in Chicago, and in an area that wasn't the best. They are my role models. They inspire me every day to continue to make them proud.
When Captain Marchant began her career in the Coast Guard in 1997, she says there were few role models who looked like her. But there was one standout, Dr. Olivia Hooker.
She was the first African-American woman to join the Coast Guard, and that was in World War II. And I had an opportunity to meet her when I was three years in the Coast Guard. And she stayed a mentor to me all the way up until her death.
So as the captain stood on the shoulders of those who came before her, she says she recognizes her responsibility as a role model to others.
When young kids, little girls see you, little boys too, when they see you and the reaction they give you, what's that like?
You know, you can't even put into words the impact that you have and what people see when they see you. And I try always to connect and make time to have conversations with them when I'm out in public.
It is hard not to get caught up in Lady Liberty.
When I promoted to captain, I did it here at the Statue of Liberty. To only be the second woman and the first minority to be the captain of the port, New York, and I'm empowered and inspired by it every day.
We are so excited to introduce you to Captain Zeita Marchant. It is lovely to talk to you. I mean, and I've been so amazed, you know, when I look at all of these vessels, I'm awestruck. But not only have you been on them, you've inspected them.
Yes, I am a traditional marine inspector and have been for over 25 years in the Coast Guard, but now I have the pleasure of overseeing the port operations here in New York and New Jersey. Just amazing opportunity to be here with you this morning.
So today, I have the honor of introducing my nominee to be the next chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Charles Q. Brown, Jr. General, welcome. General Brown's a warrior, descended from a proud line of warriors. His father, a U.S. Army Colonel, C.Q. Brown, served in Vietnam. His grandfather, U.S. Army Master Sergeant Robert E. Brown, Jr., led a segregated unit in World War II. And the command pilot, General Brown, brings to this role more than 3,000 hours of flying experience, including 130 combat hours. He knows what it means to be in the thick of battle and how to keep your cool when things get hard. Like when your F-16 was on fire and you returned to the base in Florida in 1991, CQ had to eject more than 300 miles an hour, landing in the Everglades. That's a lot of fun, huh? Well, I tell you what, he was back in the cockpit the next week with a new call sign, Swamp Thing. New call sign. I asked him inside the Oval what it was like, but I'll tell you about that later. General Brown is also a warfighter who's commanded in Europe, the Middle East, and the Indo-Pacific. And he has an unmatched firsthand knowledge of our operational theaters and a strategic vision to understand how they all work together to ensure the security for the American people. And while General Brown is a proud, butt-kicking American airman, first and always, he's also been an operational leader in the Joint Force. He gained respect across every service from those who have seen him in action and have come to depend on his judgment. More than that, he gained the respect of our allies and partners around the world, who regard General Brown as a trusted partner and a top-notch strategist. No matter how complicated the mission, from helping build and lead the coalition now of more than 80 nations strong to counter ISIS threats in the Middle East, to positioning our Air Force for the future in the Indo-Pacific, General Brown has built a reputation across the force as an unflappable and highly effective leader. As someone who creates an environment of teamwork, trust, and then executes with excellence. And someone who smokes a mean brisket. Understand you have that smoker still with you. You carry that around everywhere you go. What was it in your... I won't ask you.
When I'm flying, I put my helmet on, my visor down, my mask up. You don't know who I am. Whether I'm African American, Asian American, Hispanic, white, male or female. You just know I'm an American airman kicking your butt. I'm General C.Q. Brown, Jr. Come join us.
When you feel like, okay, you know, why do we do this? And we look at the bright, shining faces like you guys and you go, okay, that's the future, right? That's the future, and we're in good hands. That's why they rely on us. Hi, I'm Brigadier General Lorna Mahlock, Deputy Director for Combat Support at the National Security Agency's Cybersecurity Directorate. Here in the Cybersecurity Directorate, our mission is to prevent and eradicate cyber threats to U.S. national security systems, the the Department of Defense, and critical infrastructure. We provide warfighters a wide range of products and services.
To welcome Brigadier General Lorna Mahlock, who is our Deputy Director for Combat Support. Can you tell us a little bit about that job and what you enjoy about it?
Coming to work every day with a bunch of people who have a commitment to the mission. There's a passion, there's an excitement in the Cybersecurity Directorate. Our remit is really broad, from building codes, breaking codes, delivering cybersecurity.
A proud moment for all of us as history was made this week with the Senate confirmation of the first black four-star general in the Marines. Lieutenant General Michael Langley has been a Marine for 37 years with tours of duty in Japan, Afghanistan, and Somalia. He's now set to oversee 6,000 Marines as the new head of U.S. Africa Command. He will attain his new rank at a ceremony in Washington this weekend.
7-year Marine Corps veteran will take charge at the U.S. Africa Command based in Germany. Big deal there.
I'm humbled and honored for the opportunity to take on the stewardship of command at AFRICOM with the four-star bill it brings. But the milestone and what it means to the Corps is quite essential, not just because the mark in history, but what it will affect going forward.
If you had to give yourself a job description, tweet out a job description, how would you describe what you do?
I'm the person in charge.
What are you in charge of?
I am the number 2 to the CNO for operations, strategy, and plan. So I represent him in senior level discussions, and then I help formulate recommendations and options for him as the Chief of Naval Operations when we're having discussions of how the world is postured, what our reaction should be. So it's exciting and challenging work. Over my career, I've literally been the person in charge when I've had command of a ship or command of a strike group, and those are exciting and wonderful leadership times.
I'm General Mike Garrett, United States Army retired and very proud Xavier 1984 alumnus.
Hey, good afternoon, troops. Freedom 6 here. You know, I normally come to you after my long runs on Friday, but today I thought I'd wait until I got all dressed up for another event and would share my thoughts with you now. You know, when I was running this morning, I thought a lot about each and every one of you. And I thought I'd spend a few minutes today providing you an update on how we are doing with regard to our Army's priorities of people, readiness, and modernization. You know, we spent a lot of time over the last 22 months on people-first activities. And I'll tell you what, I think we are making progress.
So, African Americans started in the very first war we had, and over time we've become leaders. You know, I think about the military and what an opportunity it has created for our people. You know, this is where we had the opportunity to have some of the first desegregated jobs. This is where we had the opportunity to go to school and learn skills and attain leadership positions. And it makes me feel so good to see these Black men and women who have worked their way 25 years, 37 years, 41 years. They have worked their way up to the top. And it just makes me feel good. What you got to say about that, honey?
Well, it is, and there's a lot of, and this was a good Gap News. I was not aware of some of those people serving in those positions. The history I was aware of those who had served in the past, but the ones who are serving now, it's amazing. And you know, a lot of people don't know that they're being protected by us, and I don't know how they would feel about that, but you know, it's a great thing to point out there, and all of those people are, you know, you can't help but respect them and for what they've achieved and what they keep achieving.
Well, you know, General Colin Powell, he was the one who really helped the military transform into an all-volunteer military. And then we've got General Lloyd Austin. He's the top military person in all of the United States. And then Coast Guard Captain Zeita Marchant, running the whole port of New York, the whole East Coast, all the Coast Guard stuff. Then we have General Charles Q. Brown Jr., the swamp. What was the swamp? I forget, swamp somebody. He had to jump out the plane. Then we've got Brigadier General Lorna Mahlock. Admiral Michelle Howard. What did she say? I'm in charge of everything. And then Lieutenant General Michael Langley. And then finally, General Michael X. Garrett, who just recently retired. So look them up. Bookmark this. I'm going to make it into a separate Gap News. You can share it with your kids, share it with your Sunday school class, or whoever you want to share it with. Okay, honey.
Well, the other thing I'd like to say is that, it's still amazing to me how in this day and age, in 2024, that we're still dealing with the first blacks to do something. And a lot of people will say, well, they're not moving as quick as they should and all that. But we're going to get into reasons today as to why that has happened. And people who act like that's amazing that that it's taken so long, maybe they'll understand that the reasons for that, systemic reasons.
That's right.
Okay.
A lot of roadblocks thrown up.
All right.
All the time. All right. Well, that's...
All right. Well, we're dealing with